It's in this prose piece that we get the famous saying, "No man is an island," because we're all connected to each other. We're not separate from each other. And it's also from this we get the famous line, "Ask not for whom the bell tolls." Ernest Hemingway, the famous 20th century novelist, titled a novel for that, "For Whom the Bell Tolls." So this is famous for a variety of reasons, but most of all because of what he's saying about death. "Perchance he for whom this bell tolls," the essay begins with the idea of a bell tolling in the distance. And the word toll, when a bell tolls, that's a somber, sad sound. When a bell peals or rings, according to earlier English diction, when a bell peals or rings, it's a joyful sound, but the tolling of a bell is what it does for a funeral, when someone has died. "Perchance he for whom this bell, that I hear off in the distance, tolls, may be so ill as that he knows not it tolls for him." Some guy's sick somewhere, he hears the bell tolling, he doesn't even know it's tolling because he's dying. "And perchance I may think myself so much better than I am, as that they who are about me and see my state have caused it to toll for me, and I know not that." Just as the guy who's sick in the next block over may be the one the bell is tolling because everybody knows he's dying, but he doesn't know it. So maybe it's tolling for me. I think I'm healthy, I think I'm safe, but perhaps that bell is tolling for me. And he says, "The church is Catholic, universal. So are all her actions. All that she does belongs to all. When she baptizes a child, that action concerns me, for that child is thereby connected to that head which is my head too, and engraft into that body whereof I am a member too. And when she, the church, buries a man, that action concerns me. All mankind is of one author, and is one volume. When one man dies, one chapter is not torn out of the book, but translated into a better language, and every chapter must be so translated. God employs several translators. Some pieces are translated by age, some by sickness, some by war, some by justice, but God's hand is in every translation. And his hand shall bind up all our scattered leaves again, for that library where every book shall lie open to one another. As therefore the bell that rings to a sermon, calls not upon the preacher only, but upon the congregation to come, so this bell, the tolling bell, calls us all. But how much more me, who am brought so near the door by this sickness?" There was a contention as far as a suit in which piety and dignity, religion and estimation were mingled, which of the religious orders should ring to prayers first in the morning. And it was determined that they should ring first that rose earliest. If we understand right the dignity of this bell that tolls for our evening prayer, we would be glad to make it ours by rising early in that application, that it might be ours as well as his, whose indeed it is. The bell doth toll for him that thinks it doth, and though it intermit again, yet from that minute that occasion wrought upon him, he is united to God. You see, he's saying, we hear the bell tolling for someone dying, but we should all take it to heart and make it our tolling bell. He says, "Who casts not his eye up to the sun when it rises? But who takes off his eye from a comet when that breaks out? Who bends not his ear to any bell which upon any occasion rings, but who can remove it from that bell which is passing a piece of himself by tolling out of this world? No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. And therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." So no matter whom the bell is tolling for, who is dying, is still tolling for me, because when that man dies, a part of me dies. Never send for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Neither can we call this a begging of misery or a borrowing of misery, as though we were not miserable enough of ourselves, but must fetch in more from the next house, in taking upon us the misery of our neighbors. No, truly it were an excusable covetousness if we did. Now listen to this. "For affliction is a treasure, and scarce any man hath enough of it." Affliction is a treasure, and scarce any man hath enough of it. We don't have enough affliction. What? No man hath affliction enough that is not matured and ripened by it and made fit for God by that affliction. If a man carry treasure in bullion or in a wedge of gold, and have none coined into current monies, his treasure will not defray him as he travels. Tribulation is treasure in the nature of it, but it is not currency in the use of it, except we get nearer and nearer our home, heaven, by it. Persecution, suffering, misery does no good to us unless we allow it to move us closer to heaven, he says. Another man may be sick too, and sick to death, and this affliction may lie in his bowels as gold in a mine, and be of no use to him. But this bell, that tells me of his affliction, digs out and applies that gold to me. If by this consideration of another's danger, I take mine own into contemplation, and so secure myself by making my recourse to my God, who is our only security. This is a great essay, and this is from a man who has seen a lot of suffering and misery in his own life. So he says, when I hear the bell tolling for anyone else who's dying, I should remember that it's tolling for me because he's a part of me. And when anyone dies, and when anyone in the body of Christ dies, a part of me has died, so it's my misery. But in thinking this way, I'm not just making myself more miserable, I'm applying affliction to myself, and I'm benefiting by affliction. Affliction is a treasure, and no man hath enough of it. And so if I learn from the affliction of other people as well as from myself, then affliction becomes a treasure, and I'm nearer to God, even though in the world's eyes I'm closer and closer to death and being taken away from this life. So this is a brilliant essay by a man who'd seen a lot of suffering, and lost half of his 12 children, loses his wife and his friends. He's a man who knows what he's talking about. So John Donne is a man who's worth knowing. Not all of his poems are that somber, but I think the somber ones are the best ones. They're the ones that get closest to the ultimate realities, instead of dealing with the frivolous things that we would all prefer to think about.